Mike Anderson stood outside Stellar Solutions Auto and Spacecraft, studying the worn neon sign that flickered against the early morning sky. The massive repair facility sprawled across 3 asteroid-anchored platforms, housing everything from personal shuttles to mid-sized freighters. Ships of various species drifted in and out of the magnetic docking fields, their hulls reflecting the light of distant stars. He adjusted his oil-stained coveralls, the same ones he'd worn for 15 years while building his reputation across the Sol system. The fabric was faded but comfortable, marked with the burns and stains of countless repairs. His tools, a mix of standard Federation wrenches and his own modified instruments, clinked softly in his pockets as he walked toward the main entrance. The doors slid open with a pneumatic hiss, releasing a burst of climate-controlled air that carried the familiar scent of plasma coolant and synthetic lubricants. The lobby was packed with various alien species, tall, willowy centaurians with their crystalline skin, bulky Nexians arguing with their onboard AIs, and even a pair of methane-breathing Kryvacs in their environment suits. Behind the curved reception desk sat Luxal, a Xanthari whose iridescent scales shifted colors with each efficient movement. Her 4 eyes narrowed slightly at Mike's approach, the upper pair focusing on his grease-stained hands, while the lower set scanned his worn boots. Her translator membrane pulsed as she spoke, converting her harmonic language into standard. "If you're looking for work," she said, mandibles clicking in barely concealed disdain, "maintenance positions are filled through the Federation Labor Exchange, not direct application." She turned her attention back to her holographic display without waiting for a response. Mike cleared his throat. "Actually, I'm here about." "Please take a seat in the designated waiting area," Luxal interrupted, gesturing toward a corner where several other humans sat. "Priority is given to registered clients and emergency repairs." Her scales rippled in a pattern that Mike recognized as Xanthari amusement, though she probably didn't expect him to know their cultural signals. A Nexian captain shouldered past Mike, their massive frame nearly knocking him into a support column. Luxal's scales immediately shifted to a welcoming blue pattern. "Captain Vrax, your elevated docking slot is ready, and Chief Engineer Skuttle will personally oversee your ship's quantum drive calibration." Mike took a seat in the waiting area, pulling out his datapad. He'd spent the last month reviewing the shop's records, efficiency rates, customer satisfaction scores, repair times, and most importantly, the subtle pattern of species-based service prioritization. The previous owner had allowed these biases to flourish, creating a hierarchy that put humans near the bottom. He watched as a young human woman in a Federation Science Division uniform was repeatedly ignored by the repair scheduling eye, while a Centaurian with a simple fuel line issue was immediately assigned to a senior mechanic. The woman's frustrated expression told him this wasn't an uncommon occurrence. Through the transparent walls of the main repair bay, Mike could see at least 3 jobs being handled incorrectly. A mechanic was attempting to recalibrate a phase converter using outdated Proximant protocols, while another struggled with a simple hydrogen fuel cell that needed nothing more than a standard Earth-style pressure reset. An alert flashed across the lobby's main screen. A shipment of Centaurian quantum coils had arrived at the loading dock. Luxal dispatched 3 assistants to handle the delivery, her scales now shimmering with efficiency pride. She glanced at the waiting area, her upper eyes narrowing as she noticed Mike taking notes on his datapad. "The hiring system is automated," she called out, mandibles twitching in irritation. "Watching our operations won't improve your chances of employment." Mike nodded politely, continuing to document the workflow issues he'd need to address. He built his reputation by turning struggling repair shops into sector leaders, and Stellar Solutions would be his biggest challenge yet. The facility had potential: prime location, excellent equipment, and some genuinely skilled mechanics held back by systemic prejudice. The morning crowd grew larger, more ships docking as the system's primary star climbed higher. Mike watched, noted, and planned. Tomorrow, he'd begin implementing changes that would transform this place. But for now, he was content to observe as Luxal continued to dismiss him as just another human mechanic looking for work, unaware that she was demonstrating exactly why the previous owner had sold to him in the first place. The morning's relative calm shattered when a Javlaxian diplomatic vessel screamed into the docking area, its quantum wake disrupting nearby ships' gravitational stabilizers. Through the lobby's transparent walls, Mike could see the telltale shimmer of exotic particles dancing across the vessel's pearl-white hull, a clear sign of containment field failure. Ambassador Nixilla burst through the entrance, her bioluminescent tendrils flashing urgent patterns of distress. The tall, elegant Javlaxian's ceremonial robe swirled with embedded stardust, a display of status that made Luxal's scales shift to their most respectful golden hue. "My ship," the ambassador's translator warbled, "it's destabilizing. The Galactic Council summit begins in 3 hours, and the containment field is collapsing." Her tendrils twisted in patterns that didn't need translation. She was terrified. Luxal immediately activated the priority response protocol. "Chief Engineer Skittle and his best team will attend to this personally, Ambassador." Her lower eyes darted nervously to the growing cloud of particles surrounding the ship while her upper pair remained fixed on the prestigious client. Mike stood up, recognizing the distinctive energy signature. He'd seen this exact cascade failure pattern during his early days working on hybrid vessels. The solution was simple, but time-sensitive. He raised his hand to get Luxal's attention, but she pointedly turned away. 3 senior mechanics rushed out, their diagnostic tools already scanning the deteriorating containment field. The ambassador's vessel represented the height of Javlaxian engineering, a blend of organic crystal technology and quantum mechanics that few repair shops were qualified to service. "The field harmonics are inverting," one mechanic shouted, his handheld scanner beeping frantically. "We need to stabilize the core before." A sharp crack echoed across the docking bay as crystallization began spreading across the ship's hull. The exotic particles were beginning to affect the molecular structure of the vessel itself. Several nearby clients backed away, sensing the growing danger. Mike stepped forward again. "Excuse me, but I've seen this before. It's a simple. Please remain in the designated waiting area," Luxal snapped, her scales flushing with irritation. "This is a delicate situation requiring our most experienced team." She turned back to the ambassador, her voice softening. "I assure you, our specialists are the finest in this sector." The crystallization accelerated, creating a web-like pattern across the ship's surface. Chief Engineer Skittle, a veteran Centaurian with decades of experience, pressed his crystalline hands against the hull and shook his head. "The quantum signature is chaotic. We need to consult the Javlaxian engineering database." Mike watched as the team argued over contradicting repair procedures. The real problem was sitting right in front of them. A Terran-made phase converter installed backward in a desperate attempt to boost power output. He'd seen plenty of similar modifications during the early days of interspecies technology integration. Ambassador Nixilla's tendrils had shifted from their normal bioluminescent purple to a pale, sickly white. "The containment field is at 12%, she whispered. "If it fails completely, the quantum core will destabilize." "Do you understand what that means?" Luxal's scales lost their golden hue, fading to a terrified gray. A quantum core breach would destroy not just the ship, but a significant portion of the repair facility. She began initiating emergency evacuation protocols, her hands trembling over the controls. Mike pulled a modified multi-tool from his pocket and started walking toward the ship. A security field buzzed to life in front of him. "Sir," Luxal called out, her voice tight with stress and condescension, "return to the waiting area immediately. Perhaps you should go back to working on primitive combustion engines where you belong." The crystallization had reached the quantum core housing. Warning klaxons blared as the containment field dropped below 10%. The senior mechanics stepped back, their tools useless against the cascading failure. Mike looked at the ambassador's terrified expression, then back at Luxal's dismissive one. He'd spent 15 years dealing with this kind of prejudice, watching aliens assume humans were only capable of handling primitive technology. Now those same assumptions were about to cost them a ship, a repair facility, and possibly lives. He pulled out his owner's override card. It was time to stop watching and start fixing. Mike swiped his override card through the security field's control panel, causing the shimmering barrier to vanish. Luxelle's scales flashed in alarm as she registered the high-level access code, but before she could speak, Ambassador Nixilla's ship emitted an ominous crackle. Containment at 8%. Chief Engineer Skull called out, his crystalline form resonating with stress. The quantum core's magnetic bottling is failing. The senior mechanic scattered as another layer of crystallization crept toward the engine housing, leaving delicate fractal patterns in its wake. Luxelle's mandibles clicked rapidly as she broadcasted evacuation orders. All personnel and clients must proceed to emergency shelters immediately. This is not a drill. Ambassador, we must. Nobody's evacuating, Mike said, his voice carrying the calm confidence of someone who'd solved this problem before. He pulled a hand-modified sensor array from his toolkit and approached the ship. The device's screen displayed a complex wavelength pattern that confirmed his suspicions. Ambassador Nixilla's tendrils coiled tightly around her ceremonial staff. You, human, what do you think you're doing? Despite her alarmed tone, she made no move to stop him. At this point, even a slim chance was better than certain destruction. The phase converter's been installed backward, Mike explained, removing a panel from the ship's hull. Someone tried to boost your power output by reversing the quantum flow, but they didn't account for the harmonic resonance with your organic crystal matrix. Luxelle rushed forward, her scales shifting between panic and outrage. Step away from the ambassador's vessel. You have no authority to. She froze as Mike held up the owner's credentials again, this time long enough for her to read the full authorization. The crystallization had reached the core housing now, creating a mesmerizing but lethal display of fractal patterns. The ship's AI began broadcasting warnings in multiple languages, its voice becoming increasingly distorted as the quantum disruption affected its processors. Containment at 5%. The AI warbled. Core breach imminent. Recommended course of action. Immediate abandonment of vessel. Chief Engineer Skittle stepped forward, his crystalline fingers clicking against his diagnostic tool. Even if you're right about the phase converter, we can't reach it now. The crystallization pattern has blocked all maintenance access points. Mike pulled out another device, this one clearly of his own design. No need for the access points. Watch and learn. He pressed the device against the hull, and it emitted a focused beam of energy that cut through the crystallization, creating a temporary tunnel to the ship's internal components. Impossible, one of the senior mechanics muttered. That pattern of crystallization can only be reversed by. How did you? Humans have been dealing with crystallization since we first started experimenting with quantum drives, Mike explained, reaching through the tunnel he created. We just approach it differently. Sometimes the simplest solution is the best one. Luxelle watched in stunned silence as Mike's hands moved with practiced efficiency, rerouting power conduits and adjusting quantum flow regulators. Her scales had shifted to a color pattern he'd never seen before, one that might have indicated cognitive dissonance. Ambassador Nixilla's tendrils began to relax slightly as the ship's warning signals decreased in intensity. The containment field, it's stabilizing. Her translator struggled to convey her mix of relief and disbelief. Almost there, Mike muttered, making one final adjustment. The phase converter hummed as he reversed its orientation, and the crystallization pattern began to recede. The exotic particle cloud dissipated, and the ship's quantum core returned to its normal operational frequency. The entire repair bay fell silent except for the gentle hum of properly functioning machinery. The ambassador's ship, which moments ago had been on the verge of catastrophic failure, now sat peacefully in its docking cradle, its hull gleaming as if it had just left the manufacturing yard. Luxelle's scales had shifted to a pale, shocked gray. She stared at the diagnostic readings, then at Mike, then back at the readings. Her mandibles worked silently as she struggled to process what she'd just witnessed. Mike wiped his hands on his coveralls and turned to address the amazed crowd. It was time to introduce himself properly, not just as the mechanic who'd saved their lives, but as the owner who was about to change everything about how Stellar Solutions operated. The security alarms continued blaring as Mike cleared his throat, ready to address the stunned crowd. Before he could speak, however, the ship's quantum core emitted a new frequency, one that made Ambassador Nixilla's tendrils curl in fresh alarm. The core's still destabilizing, she warbled, her translator barely keeping up with her distress. But how? You reversed the crystallization. Mike's eyes narrowed as he checked his modified scanner. Secondary cascade, he muttered. The backward converter damaged more than just the containment field. He dove back into the access tunnel he'd created, his hands moving with practiced precision. Luxal's scales flickered between emergency red and confused purple. Perhaps we should still consider evacuation. Everyone stays put, Mike ordered, his voice carrying the weight of both authority and experience. Chief Skittle, I need your crystalline resonance. Stand by the port nacelle and tell me when it matches your natural frequency. The Centaurian engineer hesitated only a moment before complying, pressing his crystalline hands against the ship's hull. His natural harmonic properties would act as a calibration standard. Ambassador, Mike called out, does this vessel have a Mark 7 emergency bypass circuit? When she nodded, he grinned. Perfect, that's compatible with my design. From his seemingly bottomless toolkit, Mike produced a small device that looked like a hybrid between Earth technology and something far more advanced. The assembled mechanics murmured as they recognized components from at least 3 different species' engineering traditions. Is that custom-made? One of the younger mechanics asked, mandibles twitching in fascination. Built it myself, Mike confirmed, connecting it to the ship's systems. Sometimes you need to bridge the gap between different technologies. Quantum mechanics might be universal, but every species approaches it differently. The core's threatening hum increased in pitch. Warning lights flashed across the vessel's hull as the quantum instability reached a critical point. Several clients pressed against the far walls, ready to run. Mike's fingers flew over the controls of his device, making microscopic adjustments. Sweat beaded on his forehead as he coordinated with Chief Skittle, using the Centaurian's natural resonance to calibrate the quantum flow. Whatever you're going to do, Ambassador Nixilla urged, do it quickly. The council meeting. Got it, Mike exclaimed. He pressed a final sequence into his device, and the ship's quantum core went completely silent. For 3 terrifying seconds, nothing happened. Then, like a wave of liquid light, stability rippled through the vessel's systems. The warning lights died. The alarms fell silent. The quantum core hummed to life with a sound so smooth it brought tears of joy to the ambassador's eyes. Chief Skittle stepped back, his crystalline form vibrating with amazement. The resonance is perfect, he announced. Better than factory specifications. Mike emerged from the access panel, his coveralls now sporting fresh oil stains and scorch marks. He ran a final diagnostic scan, nodding with satisfaction at the results. Your ship is fixed, Ambassador, he said, pocketing his tools. I also took the liberty of optimizing your quantum throughput. You should see a 12% improvement in faster-than-light efficiency. The ambassador's tendrils swayed in a pattern that indicated deep gratitude. I don't know how to thank you, she began, reaching for her credit chit. Whatever your usual rate is, I'll triple it. Luxel finally found her voice. Ambassador, I must inform you that this human is not actually the owner. Mike finished for her, pulling out his credentials once more. Mike Anderson, new proprietor of Stellar Solutions Auto and Spacecraft. And there's no charge, Ambassador. Consider it a gesture of goodwill from the new management. The silence that followed was absolute. Luxal's scales had gone completely white, a color he hadn't seen on a Zenthuri before. The senior mechanics exchanged glances, suddenly remembering every dismissive comment they'd made about human engineering. Ambassador Nixilla's translator crackled as she laughed. A repair shop owner who still works with his hands, who builds his own tools and knows quantum mechanics inside out. Her tendrils rippled with amusement. Perhaps humans are more interesting than we've been led to believe. Mike smiled, but his eyes were serious as he looked around the repair bay. Ladies, gentlemen, and beings of all configurations, he announced, I believe it's time we had a staff meeting about some changes to our operating procedures. Mike stood in the main conference room, still wearing his stained coveralls, as staff members filed in. The room's holographic displays showed repair statistics and customer satisfaction metrics floating in three-dimensional clarity. Luxelle slipped in last, her scales still cycling through shocked color patterns. Ambassador Nixilla had insisted on staying for the meeting, her tendrils now glowing with curiosity as she settled into a hover chair near the front. Before you begin, she announced, I've already sent a recommendation to the Galactic Council's maintenance division. They'll be very interested in your unique approach. Mike nodded in thanks, then activated the main display. Let's start with some numbers, he said, bringing up a chart showing repair success rates sorted by species. Notice anything interesting about this data? Chief Engineer Skittle's crystalline form shifted uncomfortably as the pattern became clear. Jobs handled by Centaurian mechanics were given priority, while those assigned to humans, Valaxians, and other lesser species were routinely delayed or reassigned. This stops today, Mike declared, his voice firm but not unkind. I built my reputation on one simple principle. Technology doesn't care what species you are. Either you understand it, or you don't. Luxelle raised a trembling hand, her scales now showing bands of professional distress. Sir, our scheduling system is based on proven efficiency metrics and artificial barriers. Mike finished, pulling up another chart. Here's something interesting. Repair times for quantum drives. Notice how human mechanics are never assigned to them. He gestured to his recent repair. Yet somehow, a human just prevented a core breach that had your senior team stumped. The ambassador's tendrils rippled with amusement as several mechanics shifted in their seats. Mike continued, bringing up personnel files. Kex Vol here, he pointed to a shy-looking Valaxian, has an innate ability to sense quantum fluctuations, but she's been assigned to basic maintenance for 3 years. Graxlack mechanics with their 4 arms are perfect for simultaneous multi-system repairs, yet they're restricted to cargo hold work. The room fell silent as decades of prejudice were laid bare in cold, hard data. Mike pulled out his modified multi-tool, holding it up. This tool represents what we're going to become, he explained. It combines Centaurian crystalline technology, Valaxian sensory circuits, and good old-fashioned human engineering. It works because it takes the best from everyone. Ambassador Nixilla's translator hummed with approval. If I may, she added, the quantum core breach would have destroyed half this facility. Your human owner just saved all your lives using exactly this philosophy. Luxelle's scales had finally settled on a deep blue of realization. The waiting room, she said quietly. You sat there all morning watching us. Learning. Mike nodded. Every great mechanic I've ever known has 3 things in common. They're curious, they're humble, and they never stop learning. He brought up a new organizational chart. Starting tomorrow, we're implementing a merit-based system. Species doesn't matter. Results do. The room burst into conversation, with younger mechanics particularly excited. A Graxlack technician was already discussing possible repair techniques with a human colleague, their 4 arms gesturing enthusiastically. One more thing, Mike added, silencing the room. Luxelle, please stand up. The Zenthari receptionist rose slowly, her scales broadcasting embarrassment and fear. Surely this was her dismissal. You're organized, efficient, and incredibly dedicated to maintaining high standards, Mike said, surprising her. I want you to be our new integration specialist. Your job will be to help teams from different species work together effectively. Think you can handle that?" Luxal's scales cycled through confusion, relief, and finally settled on a determined golden hue. Yes, sir. I believe I've learned some valuable lessons about integration today." Ambassador Nixilla stood, her tendrils glowing brightly. "Well, I have a council meeting to attend, but I suspect Stellar Solutions is about to become very popular with the diplomatic courts." She turned to Mike. "We do so love success stories." As the ambassador left, Mike looked around the room at his newly energized staff. The next few weeks would be challenging, but he could already see the potential. A Valaxian was explaining quantum sensing to a fascinated human mechanic, while Chief Skittle discussed crystalline resonance theory with a Graxlock apprentice. This, he thought, was how innovation really happened, not by building walls, but by breaking them down. 1 week after the quantum core incident, Mike transformed the main repair bay into what he called the solution share space. Advanced holographic projectors displayed cross-sections of various spacecraft systems, while mechanics from different species gathered around repair stations. Today's session, Mike announced, standing next to a damaged warp manifold, will be led by Cuxavol. He gestured to the Valaxian mechanic who, until recently, had been relegated to basic maintenance tasks. Cuxavol stepped forward nervously, her sensory tendrils twitching. Luxal, now fully embracing her role as integration specialist, adjusted the universal translator's sensitivity to account for the Valaxian's subtle vocal frequencies. I can taste quantum fluctuations," Cuxavol began hesitantly. "Each frequency has a distinct flavor. A healthy warp core tastes like, well, in human terms, perhaps mint with honey." She approached the damaged manifold, her tendrils extending. "But this one, it tastes like burned metal and sour fruit." The assembled mechanics watched in fascination as Cuxavol demonstrated how she could diagnose complex quantum malfunctions through her species' unique sensory capabilities. A young human mechanic raised his hand. "Could you teach us what to look for in the diagnostic readings that correspond to these taste patterns?" he asked, genuine curiosity in his voice. Mike smiled as Cuxavol's confidence grew. She began explaining how certain wavelength patterns in standard diagnostics matched specific taste signatures, effectively creating a translation guide between Valaxian senses and universal repair metrics. Next up was Gerznak, a Graxlock mechanic whose 4 arms moved with practiced precision as he demonstrated simultaneous multi-system repair techniques. "The key," he explained, using all 4 arms to realign a complex series of power conduits, "is understanding how systems interact. Humans call it systems thinking. We Graxlock simply evolved to handle multiple connections at once." Chief Engineer Skittle watched with growing interest as Gerznak completed a repair sequence that typically took 3 mechanics to perform. "Could we redesign our repair protocols to take advantage of this capability?" the Centaurian asked, his crystalline form resonating with excitement. "Already in progress," Luxal chimed in, her scales glowing with professional pride as she displayed the new efficiency projections. "By pairing Graxlock mechanics with Valaxian diagnosticians and using human innovative approaches, we can reduce repair times by 60%. The sharing sessions continued throughout the day. A human mechanic demonstrated how Earth's centuries of working with primitive combustion engines had led to unique problem-solving approaches. A Centaurian showed how their crystalline biology gave them insight into structural resonance patterns. During a brief break, Mike walked through the repair bay, observing the spontaneous collaboration happening everywhere. In one corner, a Graxlock was teaching the human how to use all 4 of their repair arms through a modified exoskeleton. Nearby, a Valaxian and a Centaurian were developing a new diagnostic tool that combined taste sensing with crystalline resonance detection. Luxal approached him, her scales showing patterns of satisfaction mixed with humility. "The repair bay efficiency has increased by 43% since implementing these changes," she reported. "And customer satisfaction, She paused, mandibles clicking in amusement. "Well, let's just say we're now the preferred repair facility for 3 different diplomatic missions." Mike nodded, watching as Cuxavol confidently led a team through a complex quantum drive diagnosis. "You know what the best part is?" he asked. "What's that, sir?" "I haven't had to fix anything myself all day. They're teaching each other." He gestured to where Chief Skittle was excitedly discussing a new repair technique with a mixed species group. "That's real progress." The day ended with an unexpected visit from a Javlaxian ship captain who had heard about their unique repair methods. As the captain watched Cuxavol diagnose their quantum drive, while Gerznak performed a 4-armed maintenance sequence, their tendrils lit up with amazement. "I visited repair shops across 12 sectors," the captain commented to Mike, "but I've never seen anything like this. How did you create such harmony among different species?" Mike smiled, watching his team work together seamlessly. "I didn't create it," he replied. "I just removed the barriers that kept it from happening naturally." Turns out, good mechanics are good mechanics, no matter how many arms, tendrils, or crystalline structures they have. Lexadel's scales flickered with something that might have been pride as she updated the day's success metrics. The old prejudices were falling away, replaced by something far more valuable: mutual respect and shared knowledge. A sleek, midnight black vessel glided into Stellar Solutions' docking bay 1 month after the new training programs began. Its design was a patchwork of technologies: Centaurian crystal matrices alongside human-style thrust vectoring, Valaxian quantum sensors mixed with Grax-like power distribution systems. Luxel's scales shifted to analytical orange as she scanned the ship's registration. "Unusual configuration," she noted, bringing up the details on her holographic display. "The energy signatures don't match any known manufacturer." Mike was already elbow-deep in a complex repair when the ship's crew entered the lobby. 3 figures in sophisticated environmental suits approached the desk, their faceplates opaque. The leader spoke through a modified translator that masked their species identity. "We require immediate maintenance," the figure stated. "Our combination of systems is unique. We've been told this facility specializes in innovative repairs." Luxel's scales flickered with momentary suspicion, but she maintained her professional demeanor. "Of course, our team can handle any combination of technologies. Would you prefer a specific species of mechanic for the repair?" The figures exchanged glances. "We were informed that species designation was irrelevant here," the leader replied carefully. "We trust your judgment." Mike emerged from his repair bay, wiping grease from his hands. Something about the visitors' body language caught his attention. They were too rigid, too controlled. He'd seen that kind of careful observation before, during his early days working the frontier sectors. "I'll take lead on this one," he announced, surprising both Luxel and the visitors. "Been a while since I've gotten properly dirty with a hybrid system." The leader's helmet tilted slightly. "The owner performs repairs personally." "Best way to stay sharp," Mike replied cheerfully, already scanning the ship with his modified diagnostic tools. "Interesting configuration you've got here. That quantum matrix has quite a story to tell." The visitors tensed imperceptibly as Mike worked. He called over Cuxavol, who extended her sensory tendrils toward the ship's systems. "Tastes complicated," she reported. "Multiple quantum signatures, some deliberately masked." Gerznak joined them, his 4 arms moving efficiently as he accessed different systems simultaneously. Chief Skittle's crystalline form resonated with the ship's unusual frequencies, adding another layer of diagnosis. "You know," Mike said conversationally as he worked, "this modification pattern is familiar. Saw something similar about 5 years ago, out in the Cygnus sector, right after the infamous Shadow Fleet raid on the merchant convoy." The temperature in the repair bay seemed to drop several degrees. The visitors remained statue still. "Fascinating design choices," Mike continued, pointing out details to his team. "See how they've masked the power signature. Classic smuggler technique. But the real genius is how they've integrated different species technologies to make it untraceable. Almost perfect. Almost. The leader asked, their voice carefully neutral. Mike grinned. Well, you didn't count on a repair shop where every species shares their knowledge freely. Kixavol can taste the masked quantum frequencies. Gurisnak's forearm technique reveals the hidden power routines, and Chief Skittle's crystalline resonance. He paused meaningfully. The leader's posture shifted slightly. Are you suggesting that you're testing repair shops to find one that won't notice your ship's special modifications? Mike shrugged. Don't worry. We're not affiliated with any law enforcement agencies, but we do have a policy about improving every ship that comes through our bay. To demonstrate, he made a few quick adjustments. The ship's power output suddenly increased by 40%, while its quantum signature became even more subtle. There, Mike said, stepping back. More efficient, harder to trace, and I threw in a free tune-up of your stealth systems. Consider it a professional courtesy from one innovator to another. The leader was silent for a long moment before reaching up to remove their helmet, revealing the scaled features of a notorious space pirate captain. A test and a repair, they said with grudging respect. Impressive. Your reputation for discretion and skill will be noted. After the visitors departed, Ulxal approached Mike, her scales showing concerned confusion. You helped them, even knowing who they were. Mike watched the ship disappear into the darkness of space. We're mechanics, Luxal. We fix things. Sometimes that means machines, sometimes it means prejudices. Today, maybe we fixed some assumptions about what a repair shop can be. He turned to his team, who had gathered around with curious expressions. Now, who wants to learn about those power system modifications I just made? Because I think we can improve them even further. The mechanics eagerly crowded around as Mike began to explain, each species bringing their unique perspective to the discussion. In the background, Ulxal's scales shifted to a new color, one that perfectly matched the gold of the rising sun. The Galactic Excellence Award ceremony transformed the main repair bay into a grand hall, with holographic displays showcasing Stellar Solutions' achievements over the past year. Representatives from every major spacefaring civilization mingled among the tools and diagnostic equipment that Mike had insisted remain in place. We're celebrating who we are, he'd explained, not pretending to be something we're not. Luxal stood at the podium, her scales shimmering with pride as she addressed the assembled dignitaries. The nervous, prejudiced receptionist of a year ago had evolved into a confident leader who championed integration across species boundaries. The story I'm about to tell you, she began, her translator perfectly modulated, starts with a human in dirty coveralls who taught me that greatness doesn't wear a uniform. Her upper eyes found Mike in the crowd, still wearing his work clothes, still carrying his custom toolkit. In 1 year, Stellar Solutions hasn't just repaired ships. We've repaired perceptions. Our Valaxian quantum tasting techniques are being studied at the Galactic Engineering Academy. The Graxlock multi-limb repair protocols have been adopted by facilities across 3 sectors. And human innovative approaches. She paused, mandibles clicking in amusement. Well, they're still surprising us every day. Ambassador Nixilla sat in the front row, her tendrils glowing with approval. The quantum core incident that had started it all had become something of a legend in diplomatic circles. Next to her sat the space pirate captain, now a regular client, their scaled features hidden beneath a ceremonial hood. Our success metrics tell part of the story, Ulxal continued, bringing up a holographic display. Repair times reduced by 70%. Customer satisfaction at unprecedented levels. A waiting list of mechanics from every species wanting to join our team. Chief Engineer Skittle's crystalline form resonated with pride as Luxal highlighted the innovative repair techniques his team had developed. Zavol sat straighter as her quantum-tasting diagnostic system was praised. Gurisnak's 4 arms moved in pleased synchronization at the mention of his contributions. But numbers don't tell the whole story, Luxal said, her scales shifting to a deep, sincere blue. The real achievement is in the small moments. The human mechanic using a Galactic Exo Assist unit. The Valaxian teaching quantum tasting meditation to a Centaurian. The daily proof that when we stop seeing differences as barriers, they become advantages. Suddenly, emergency klaxons cut through the ceremony. A heavy freight hauler had suffered a catastrophic system failure and was requesting immediate emergency docking. Without hesitation, Mike grabbed his toolkit and headed for the repair bay. Luxal watched as, one by one, mechanics of every species followed him. There was no discussion of who should take the lead, no hierarchy based on species, just professionals ready to work together. Ladies, gentlemen, and beings of all configurations, Luxal addressed the surprised crowd. You're about to see what makes Stellar Solutions truly excellent. The massive freight hauler limped into the docking bay, its systems screaming in multiple frequencies. Mike was already calling out assignments based on each species' strengths. Kixvol's tendrils extended to taste the quantum dissonance, while Gerznek's 4 arms accessed multiple repair points simultaneously. The assembled dignitaries watched in amazement as the repair team worked in perfect harmony. Chief Skittle's crystalline resonance stabilized the power fluctuations while human mechanics implemented innovative bypasses. Within minutes, the crisis was under control. This, Luxal declared proudly, is the real ceremony. Not speeches or awards, but beings of all species working together, each contributing their unique gifts to solve problems. The freight hauler's captain, a gruff Nexian, approached the podium after the repair. I've had emergency repairs at dozens of facilities, they rumbled. Never seen anything like this. How do you do it? Luxal's scales rippled with joy as she watched Mike teaching the young Centaurian mechanic a new technique, while a Valaxian and Galactic collaborated on diagnostics nearby. We stopped trying to make everyone work the same way, she explained, and started celebrating how everyone works differently. As the ceremony resumed, Mike finally stepped forward to accept the award. His coveralls were stained with fresh hydraulic fluid, his hand still carrying the marks of the emergency repair. He looked at his team, every species, every background, united in purpose. The award's nice, he said with a smile, but I think we've got work to do. After all, those ships won't fix themselves. The repair bay erupted in cheers as mechanics returned to their stations, ready to continue proving that excellence knows no species and innovation speaks every language.